Hello and welcome to Weapons and Warfare. For Straight Arrow News, I'm your host, Ryan Robertson. Just ahead on this week's episode, they call it Mission Command on the Move. See how General Dynamics is building for the Army of the future as we get an up-close look at 3 new vehicles that were on display at AUSA. And unchanged for decades, the industry standard in helicopter pilot helmets is getting an upgrade. We go one-on-one with the folks at GENTEX to get the latest on the HGU 56P in our Weapon of the Week. But first, some headlines you may have missed. One of the more popular sights on the AUSA exhibition floor was the full-sized Bell V-280 Valor, also known as the Army's future long-range assault aircraft. Of course, in February, the Army pulled the plug on what was then considered its biggest aviation priority, the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft. A decision that has some asking if the V-280 will make it to the finish line. Those closest to the project tell Weapons and Warfare they have no doubt the Valor will ultimately replace the Sikorsky UH-60 Blackhawk.
If you were here yesterday morning and heard the Secretary talk about it, she's doubled down on it. She is absolutely committed to this system, and I think it's going to change fundamentally how we operate in terms of the way it extends the battlefield, the lethality that it'll bring, the depth. We're just in a great place there.
Now that we are the company of choice and on a program of record, we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm. Now the questions are, when and how do we do this and how do we do that versus, is this the right platform? What can you do? Just that shift in the mentality and all the engagements and the questions we get is really exciting.
The Army is planning for the first V-280 flight in 2026, with low-rate initial production scheduled to begin in 2028 and initial fielding of the aircraft in 2030. As the nature of combat readiness continues to evolve for U.S. forces in the Pacific, so are the means to keep combatants in the fight. To that end, the USS Chosin recently achieved a breakthrough in combat readiness as it successfully demonstrated the Transferable Reload at Sea method, or TRAM, on an underway warship in the open ocean for the first time. Put more simply, sailors were able to put things that go boom in the ship's vertical launch system. Sailors aboard the Ticonderoga-class cruiser used a hydraulically powered TRAM device to load an empty missile canister on the Mark 41 VLS while off the coast of San Diego. Of the effort, the Secretary of the Navy, Carlos Del Toro, said, "Today we proved just how game-changing TRAM truly is, and what a powerful deterrent it will be to our competitor." Del Toro went on to say the Navy is on track to begin fielding TRAM in 2 to 3 years. And the Marine Corps' XQ-58A Valkyrie has re-entered the chat. According to a press release, the Kratos-made unmanned tactical aircraft completed its latest test flight and first multi-service integration effort during Emerald Flag 2024 at Eglin Air Force Base, Florida in October. One senior leader involved said the success of the flight test during Emerald Flag pushed the manned-unmanned teaming concept a step further for the entire joint force. Winston Churchill is credited with saying to improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often. Changing often for an organization as large as the U.S. Army is no small feat. But if you listen to military leadership these days, you'll know change is on everyone's minds, including their commercial partners. Partners who are not only listening, but bringing some new answers to the table too. Prominently parked in booth 703 on the AUSA exhibition floor at this year's gathering were some vehicles that represent truly innovative thinking from General Dynamics Land Systems. Separately, the Stryker, T-Rex, and Mutt are all very capable, but they were built with a collective vision in mind. It all starts with the Stryker Mission Command on the Move, or MCOTM, taking a traditionally static battle position and getting it closer to the fight.
So how do you take something like this, how you distribute the assets within the command post, and then leverage assets that are unmanned, maybe perform functions of reconnaissance, they might be performing functions of disguising the command post by making it look like, from a signature perspective, that it's not where it is. So that's the idea of Mission Command on the Move.
Jeff Massimilla is the Global Vice President of Engineering, Design, and Technology at General Dynamics Land Systems. He says it's all about creating multiple advantages for a crew of up to 6 soldiers.
How do we take unique ways of generating power? How do we take the things you're going to talk about on the MUD XM over here, where I can make the command post look like it's in a different spot than it is, and integrating that all into a singular identity so I can really keep the Army safe or the customer safe when they're out there and they have to set up that command post.
One very important piece to the entire concept is the Tracked Robot 10-Ton, aka T-Rex, a robotic combat vehicle that can be equipped to support reconnaissance missions, as well as fire support, air defense, and electronic warfare missions.
You've got some amount of range between the operators in their manned platforms, similar to the MCOM Striker that's in our booth this year, and then the standoff from this vehicle to the threats, to the targets from a reconnaissance surveillance standpoint, then from an MTEX standpoint, to be able to defeat threats before they come into the bubble.
If the T-Rex sounds a little familiar, that might be because we recently profiled it as one of the machines the Army is considering for its next robotic combat vehicle. Chad Malek, program manager for General Dynamics, says the platform's benefits are numerous.
I mean, you'd be able to keep soldiers out of harm's way, create that extra time and space and standoff, create options for commanders so that they can dedicate their resources to the most important tasks and let these systems do the things that are more mundane and more dangerous.
And that brings us to the MUT XM. General Dynamics says it's the newest member of the multi-utility tactical transport robotic vehicle family, built for a variety of missions, like walking a robotic dog to wherever soldiers need eyes on a situation but don't want to be exposed.
It's a soldier's best friend, right? You know, mutts are the best dogs, and this is the best robot for soldiers. As far as things that we can do with it, right, with that expanded power offload, 10 kilowatts plus, we can power many different payloads. With a payload of over 3,000 pounds, that gives us a lot of options.
When we talked to General Dynamics at AUSA, they told us the Army is still mulling whether it should sink its teeth into the unit of vehicles General Dynamics put on display. But the concept of MCOM, or Mission Command on the Move, certainly seems like one worth pursuing, because one of the biggest lessons from the war in Ukraine is static targets are sitting ducks once drones start flying.
Serving you clarity through context, our mission at SAN is to deliver the news straight down the middle. We're different from mainstream media because we spotlight distorted headlines and show you how to do it too. Discover stories that right and left-leaning outlets are choosing not to cover by using our Media Mist tool. Download the SAN app and turn on notifications to have straight facts delivered right to your phone or tablet, and get straight facts anytime at SAN.com.
All right, folks, for this week's Weapon of the Week, we're going to be talking about helmets that the Army uses, and joining me now to talk about those is Marcus Gangler with GENTEX. Marcus, your official title, please?
Yeah, I'm the Director for Rotary Wing Applications here at GENTEX.
That's why I didn't want to say it, because it's a very long title. So Marcus, talk to me about these helmets. Obviously, GENTEX, you've been making helmets since the 40s. Right. You have the ground helmets that most soldiers are familiar with, but you guys also have other helmets that
we
you
do
make.
That's right. As you can see, we specialize in we have a very big segment now in the special operations helmet, but my segment happens to be Army aviation, and well, not just Army aviation, but aviation in general. And so we've made the HGU 56P now for about 30 plus years.
And this is something that every helicopter pilot is familiar with.
Every helicopter pilot that flies for the DoD is familiar with this helmet. Sure. The Army's had it now for 30 years. The Navy is fielding it for their younger aviators, and the Marines and the Marines and the Air Force have had this as well. What I did want to, kind of focus on is that you'll notice that the Block 3 Apache helmet is now very similar to the HGU 56P. There was a unique helmet for this when the Apache was first fielded. When they fielded the Echo model Apache, we went to a standardized helmet, so that the common design is the same. However, the uniqueness of this helmet is the fact that their integrated heads-up display connects to this helmet in a unique way, very different than the standard 56P. And so therefore that monocle comes up here, sits at the eye of the aviator so that he can fly from that. The HDU 56P, like I said, has been around for many years, and we're finally giving it a tech refresh. We're calling it the lockdown liner. And frankly, what that is, for those that are of your audience that are familiar with these helmets, many times the impact liner that's been inside has been a one-piece liner, many times a little uncomfortable. So we've now broken it up into 3 different distinct pieces that allow for some breathability and comfort, as well as an octi-dial here that allows for a more stable fit for the back of the nape strap. This should allow for those that fly with goggles or other head-borne devices to have a little bit more stable and more comfortable feel. And so we're looking forward to fielding that sometime in 2025, and we're really excited to show it here at the show.
Absolutely. So helicopter pilots have some more comfort to look forward to. Last little thing I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
You mentioned the heads-up display on the Apache helicopter.
That's correct.
What kind of information are they able to see that you're able to put up in that heads-up display?
So the age 64 pilots today are able to take the image that's being produced from their forward-looking infrared as well as their day TV cameras, and they're able to portray that information into their helmets. They use it for targeting purposes. Many of the gun footage that we're familiar with is taken from the image that's produced for that heads-up display. So we're very familiar with what it looks like.
Sure.
It also has data that allows the pilots to fly. So basically a rate of descent, rate of climb, whether they're in trim, airspeed, altitude, those sorts of information is also available for them as well. And frankly, one of the biggest pushes I think for the Army and Army Aviation is to improve upon the heads-up displays that are available for aviators. And so we partner a lot with our industry partners when it comes to heads-up displays and heads-up display technology, because much like an aircraft is a platform, we believe our helmet system is a platform with which other industry partners will use to put their kit and capability on. So we're excited to work with them.
Marcus, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so
Appreciate
much
it.
for the time.
When you go to trade shows like the ones AUSA, AFA, and the Navy League host, you see a lot of eye candy. So much so that brands are always looking for ways to one-up one another. And that's the subject of this week's Comms Check. While we were in Washington, D.C. for AUSA 2024, the display for the General Dynamics Mission Command on the Move booth, yes, the one we profiled earlier, was something that can be best described as a crowd stopper. Looking like something straight from Times Square, only instead of advertising the next Minions movie or pumpkin spice latte, it's an 8-wheeled Stryker, looking like it's about to drive off the screen and onto the exhibition floor.
The goal was not necessarily to inform with information, it was to just kind of get some eyeballs and have people stop, and they are. It seems like they're kind of stopping. So these rules that we come up with, we apply them to every project and every client, and then sometimes it's just flat screen stuff, which we have up here too, and sometimes it's crazy like this.
Dave Corbett is the Executive Creative Director for Pluto, a creative content agency. A quick glance at its website shows the team routinely works with organizations like the U.S. Post Office, Aldi grocery stores, and Topgolf, just to name a few. So we wanted to know if working for a client like General Dynamics presented any special kind of challenge.
Sometimes it's very important stuff, and we're showing it to the right people at the right time, and it's got to be. So there's some gray area with other brands and products. Getting it right is not always. This has to be dead nuts every time. There's no wiggle room, which is very difficult when you also have that and you also have a deadline. So but yeah, some of the people at Pluto find there's some kind of purpose with it, and some just think it's way cooler because there's things fire in, and these things are so epically giant that they're just impressive looking and to be around.
And if you're wondering how long it takes to create something like that, Dave tells us Pluto's artists spend upwards of 8 months on each vehicle.
All opinions expressed in this segment are solely the opinions of the contributors.
To wrap up this week, folks, I'm going to spend a few minutes speaking on the dire consequences of inaction, specifically how U.S. and Western inaction is prolonging the war in Ukraine. While most of you might say the war between Kyiv and Moscow started in 2022, for the Ukrainians, the war started back in 2014, when Vladimir Putin ordered a soft invasion of eastern Ukraine and illegally annexed Crimea. Now, because of a security agreement called the Budapest Memorandum, the United States was obligated to come to Ukraine's defense, but didn't. U.S. inaction allowed Russia's illegal invasion and annexation to stand. In the decades since, Ukraine asked over and over for help from its Western partners to fight off the Russians and defend against further aggressions. Remember that phone call during the 2020 election cycle between then President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky? That call took place because Ukraine needed air defense weapon systems. The White House and other leaders in the West often blame their inaction on the need to not exacerbate the situation or because they don't want to cross any Russian red lines. That's why, after the full-scale war broke out, advanced weapon systems like Abrams tanks, Patriot missile batteries, and F-16s were not sent to Ukraine for months, or years in some cases. Zelensky told Ukrainians just last week, inaction and indecision from the West translates to dead Ukrainians. I'm not a military expert, but to me, that is a losing strategy, and it allows our enemies to dictate the pace and place of battle. U.S. troops aren't engaged with Russian forces in Ukraine yet, but if the United States continues to take a path of inaction or delayed action in Ukraine, Russia and its allies will see that as continued weakness and will want to seize more of Europe. Putin and his cronies say as much nearly every night on Russian state media. The U.S., Western Europe, and most of the industrialized world wants peace in Ukraine. Putin wants war, and his actions prove it. It's why the Kremlin is working with Iran and North Korea to get not just weapons, but now soldiers as well. Around 10,000 North Korean soldiers are either in Russia or en route to Russia, where they'll help fight against the Ukrainians. Now, according to the latest casualty numbers, those 10,000 or so soldiers represent about 10 days worth of casualties on the Russian side. So it's probably not enough to sway things at the front lines. But if the West doesn't act on this latest escalation by Russia to hire foreign soldiers to help further its invasion of a sovereign democracy, then the enemies of progress and prosperity will only be further emboldened. It's time for decisive action against Russia, but that takes decisive leadership. Let's hope we get that after next week, when U.S. voters cast their decision on who will lead the nation for the next 4 years. Because if U.S. inaction continues, the consequences will be dire. That'll do it for us this week on Weapons and Warfare. Please remember to like and subscribe to all of our social feeds and share the show with your friends. For senior producer Brett Baker, video editor Brian Spencer, and graphics artist Dakota Patillo, I'm Ryan Robertson with Straight Arrow News, signing off.